3 months after the Exodus, the First War ended. The conflict between the Vryn and the Delthari had started over a simple trade dispute. Without human mediators to explain what each species actually meant versus what they said, both sides assumed bad faith. Words led to threats. Threats led to military mobilization. Mobilization led to a border skirmish that killed 200 beings in the first hour. The war lasted 17 days. 8,000 died before exhaustion and economic collapse forced both sides to negotiate. The peace treaty took 6 weeks to draft because every word had to be argued over, with no human translators to bridge the linguistic and cultural gaps. The final document satisfied no one but at least stopped the killing. On Earth, Hana watched the reports with a heavy heart. Could we have prevented this? Bora asked. She had returned to Earth with the others, settling into the new diplomatic academy that humanity was building. Yes, Hana said honestly. A human mediator could have resolved the initial dispute in an afternoon. We would have explained what the Vryn actually meant when they said the Delthari were being inflexible. We would have clarified what the Delthari meant when they called the Vryn insufficiently committed. Both phrases sound hostile but actually indicated willingness to compromise in their respective cultures. Then we let them die. Those 8,000, no, the Council let them die. The Council that decided human abilities should be property to confiscate rather than skills to learn. The Council that spent 70 years using our services without ever asking how we did what we did. This is the cost of that choice. Does it get easier? Bora asked. Watching them suffer? No, Hana admitted. It doesn't. But necessary things rarely do. The Second War was worse. 2 species on the frontier declared war over territorial claims that human cartographers had carefully managed for decades. The humans had understood that one species measured territory by resource value, while the other measured it by spiritual significance. A single star system could be incredibly valuable to one and completely worthless to the other. Even though both sides claimed it, human mediators had always arranged peaceful swaps, trading territories that each species valued differently. Without those mediators, both sides insisted on the same systems, unable to understand why the other cared so much about worthless space. 40,000 died in that war before a third species offered to mediate. Their attempt was clumsy, riddled with cultural misunderstandings, but they tried. The war ended with a treaty that neither side liked but both could live with. On Earth, Daewon noted the third species mediation attempt with interest. They're learning, he told Taemin during a briefing. Slowly, painfully, but learning. At what cost? 40,000 dead versus centuries of dependency. Yes, the cost is high. But the alternative was humanity becoming permanent caretakers to a galaxy of children who never grew up. Taemin pulled up another report. The Council has fractured. 3 species have withdrawn completely. 4 more are threatening to leave. The economic system has essentially collapsed. They've reverted to bilateral trade agreements because no one trusts the multilateral ones without human verification. And Vexthar? Under house arrest. His own species removed him from power when evidence surfaced that he planned to sell human genetic information to private corporations. He wasn't trying to help the galaxy communicate better. He wanted to profit from our abilities. Daewon felt no satisfaction in the reptilians' fall. And the rest of the Council? Trying. Counselor Thex has emerged as the de facto leader. He's pushing for reforms. They've established a new diplomatic training institute, trying to teach mediators using human techniques. It's rough, but they're attempting it. How rough? Taemin smiled grimly. Their first class of mediators managed to prevent one conflict and accidentally started 2 others. But they're learning from failures. That's more than they did before. 6 months after the Exodus, first contact protocols collapsed again. A new species, the Torvin, made contact with Council ships. Without human first contact specialists, the Council tried to manage the introduction using their newly trained diplomats. It went poorly. A misunderstood gesture led to a Torvin ship opening fire. The Council ship survived, but the Torvin fled, convinced the Council was hostile. It took 4 months of careful pursuit and increasingly desperate attempts at communication before a Council mediator, a young Delthari, trained in human techniques, finally managed to establish peaceful dialogue. The mediator's name was Kelthar, and his success was celebrated across Council space as proof that non-humans could learn. On Earth, young Mai watched the celebration broadcasts. They're celebrating what they should have been capable of all along, she observed. But they weren't capable before, Sung-ho replied. He had joined the diplomatic academy as an instructor, teaching alien students via remote connection. Now they are. That's growth, paid for in blood. Yes, but whose fault is that blood? Ours for leaving or theirs for never learning? Young Mai had no answer. The economic collapse bottomed out at 8 months. Galactic trade had dropped to 40% of pre-Exodus levels. Trillions of credits had evaporated. Millions of beings were unemployed. The Council's currency had lost half its value. But then slowly, recovery began. Species started communicating directly with each other, developing bilateral agreements based on actual understanding rather than human-mediated compromises. The agreements were simpler, more limited, but they were genuine. Both sides knew exactly what they were agreeing to because they had learned to verify understanding themselves. Jiwoo monitored the recovery from Earth, analyzing trade patterns. They're rebuilding, he reported to the human leadership. Not to what it was, but to something more sustainable. They're trading less but with more certainty. Is that better? One official asked. Long-term? Yes. They were overextended before, making deals they didn't fully understand because human mediators made it easy. Now they only make deals they actually comprehend. The total volume is lower, but the stability is higher. 10 months after the Exodus, Counselor Thek sent a message to Earth. Daewon read it in his office. With Hana and Taemin present. He says the Council has reformed, Daewon summarized. They've adopted new protocols that prioritize genuine mutual understanding over expedient agreements. They've trained over 10,000 mediators in human-derived techniques. They've restructured their entire diplomatic framework to encourage species to understand each other, rather than rely on translators. And he wants us back. Hana guessed. He's requesting that we consider returning, not demanding. Requesting. He acknowledges that humanity's withdrawal was necessary and that the lessons learned were worth the cost, even though the cost was terrible. Do you believe him? Taemin asked. Daewon considered. Yes, I do. Thex was the only counselor who voted against the original demand. He understood even then that what they were asking was wrong. If he says they've changed, I believe they've at least tried to change. So what do? We send an evaluation team. Not diplomats yet, just observers. They'll spend 2 months watching how the new council functions. If it's genuine reform and not just cosmetic changes to lure us back, then we'll consider returning. The evaluation team arrived at Unity Station 11 months after the Exodus. Youngmi led it, along with Bora and Jiwoo. They came not as representatives with power, but as observers with notebooks. What they found surprised them. The council chamber had changed. The elevated seats where counselors had literally looked down on those below had been removed. Now all species sat at the same level around a circular table. The symbolism was obvious, but the practical effect was real. No species appeared more important than another. It's different, Bora whispered to Youngmi as they watched a session. Quieter too, Youngmi noted. They actually listen to each other now. They watched as 2 species argued over a trade route. The argument was stilted, awkward, filled with pauses as both sides worked to ensure mutual understanding. A Delthari mediator sat between them, occasionally asking clarifying questions using techniques clearly learned from human instructors. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't elegant, but it was real. Jiwoo spent his time reviewing economic data. He met with merchants, trade officials, and corporate leaders. All told similar stories. Business was harder now, required more effort, but was more honest. Before we made a deal and human mediators ensured it worked, one Vrin merchant explained. We didn't always understand our partners, but the humans bridged the gap. Now we have to bridge it ourselves. It's exhausting. But I trust my current partners more than I ever trusted the old ones because I actually understand them. Young Mai interviewed the newly trained mediators. Most were humble about their abilities, acknowledging they would never match human skill, but were learning to be adequate. We fail sometimes, Kelthar told her honestly. Last month I mediated a dispute and both sides left angry because I didn't fully understand the cultural contexts. But I learned from it. We're building a library of case studies, documenting our failures so others can learn from them. It's slow work. Slower than having humans do it, Youngmi observed. But it's ours, the Delthari replied with quiet pride. We're learning to understand each other ourselves. Eventually, we'll be good at this. The decision came not from the Council, but from humanity itself. On day 25, Earth transmitted a message to every human in Council space. It was brief, encrypted, and absolute. Come home. Within hours, preparations began. 40 million humans across 400 worlds started packing. They did it quietly, efficiently, without drama or announcement. They simply began preparing to leave. Young Me stood in her apartment on Unity Station, placing her few possessions into storage containers. 6 years she had lived here. 6 years of helping species understand each other, of preventing conflicts, of building bridges. Now she was leaving and the bridges were crumbling behind her. Her doorbell chimed. She opened it to find an alien standing there, a Delthari, one of the species she had worked with extensively. His tentacles quivered with emotion. "Is it true?" he asked. "Are you leaving?" "Yes, but why?" "We need you." "I need you. My people rely on your counsel." Young Mai looked at him with genuine sadness. "Your people relied on my service. They never tried to understand what I was actually doing. They never learned how I did it. They just used the results. Teach us then. Stay and teach us." We tried. For 70 years we tried. We explained, we demonstrated. We offered to help your species develop your own diplomatic corps. Do you know what your government said? They said it was unnecessary because humans would always be available. The Delthari's tentacles drooped. I didn't know. Most didn't. Most just took human help for granted. And when the Council demanded we give up our gifts like they were property to be confiscated, no one spoke against it except Councillor Thex. I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't rebuild what was broken. Across Unity Station, similar scenes played out. Humans saying goodbye to colleagues, friends, partners. Some aliens begged them to stay. Others were angry, feeling betrayed. Most were simply confused, unable to grasp why humanity was withdrawing when the galaxy needed them most. Jiwoo was released from detention on day 26. He walked out of the facility to find Sung-ho waiting with a transport. "Good timing," Sung-ho said. "We're pulling out in 48 hours. What about the others who were arrested?" "All released." The Council caved on that at least, too afraid we'd leave them behind if they kept holding them. Jiwoo settled into the transport, watching Frontier Station pass by through the window. "How bad is it?" "Bad. 2 actual shooting wars have started. The economic system is in freefall. The Council is holding emergency sessions daily, but they can't agree on anything without human mediators. Vexthar is still refusing to back down on the original demand, but he's losing support. Is it worth it? All this chaos just to make a point?" Sung-ho was quiet for a moment. "Yes, because the alternative was worse. Imagine if we'd let them study us, dissect our abilities, try to copy them artificially. They would have failed. You can't replicate millennia of cultural evolution in a lab. But they would have spent decades trying, treating us like lab specimens, all while assuming they could just manufacture what we do naturally. This way, at least they learn the truth. The truth that they need us. No." Sung-ho shook his head. "The truth that they need to learn what we know. There's a difference. One makes us slaves, the other makes us teachers. But they have to want to learn." On Unity Station's main concourse, Hana held her final briefing with the Translation Corps. 200 humans gathered, all preparing to depart. "I know this is hard," she told them. "I know many of you have built lives here. Some of you have alien friends, partners, even families. This exodus will hurt, but it's necessary." "What if they change their minds?" Bora asked. "What if the Council withdraws the demand?" "They already did," Hana said quietly. 2 days ago. Vexthar was overruled by the other counselors. They've rescinded the genetic research requirement. They've dropped all sanctions. They've even issued a formal apology. Shocked silence filled the room. "Then why are we leaving?" someone asked. "Because rescinding their demand isn't enough. They need to understand that human cooperation is a gift, not a right. They need to feel our absence deeply enough that they never take us for granted again. And most importantly, they need to develop their own communication abilities instead of depending on ours." "So this is still happening? The exodus?" "Yes, Earth has decided. We're going home." The news spread through Unity Station like fire. The Council had backed down, but humanity was leaving anyway. Panic set in among the alien populations. Day 1 stood in the Council chamber one final time. The 12 counselors looked diminished somehow, their positions of power seeming hollow now. Ambassador, Counselor Mira Esh spoke, her voice trembling. We've met your demands. We've released your people, withdrawn all sanctions, and formally rescinded the research requirement. What more do you want? Nothing, Day One replied simply. You've met the immediate demands, yes, but you haven't addressed the fundamental problem. Which is? Vexthar asked, his earlier arrogance replaced by exhaustion. You don't see us as partners. You see us as resources. Even now you're asking what you need to do to make us stay, as if we're employees negotiating a contract. You're not asking how you can become better communicators yourselves. You're not asking how you can learn what we know. You're just trying to keep your tools in place. Counselor Thex spread his wings slightly. Then what would you have us do, Ambassador? Tell us plainly. Rebuild, Daewon said. Rebuild your council from the ground up with the understanding that communication is a skill to be learned, not a service to be purchased. Develop your own diplomatic traditions, train your own mediators, learn to understand each other without human translators standing between you. Prove that you can cooperate because you want to, not because you have to. That will take years, Miraesh protested. Decades even. How many will die while we learn? How many have died in the past month because you never bothered to learn? At least now you have motivation. You're abandoning us, Vexthar said bitterly. No, we're letting you grow up. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Daewon continued, his voice gentler now. For 70 years, humanity has been the glue holding this council together. We mediated your disputes, translated your languages, bridged your cultural gaps. We did it gladly because we believed in what the council could be. But we became a crutch. You never developed your own abilities because you didn't need to. We were always there. So this is punishment? Miraesh asked. This is education. The galaxy must learn to communicate without human helpers. It will be painful. People will die. Wars will be fought. But at the end, you'll be stronger. You'll be truly unified, not just held together by human effort. And what if we fail? Vexthar asked quietly. What if we can't learn? What if the council collapses without you? Then it deserves to collapse, Daewon said bluntly. Any civilization that can only function with one species holding it together isn't really a civilization. It's a dependency. He looked at each counselor in turn. We'll be watching from Earth. In 1 year, if you've rebuilt your council based on mutual understanding rather than human mediation, if you've developed your own diplomatic capabilities, if you've proven you can cooperate as equals, then we'll consider returning. Not as your fixers, not as your tools, but as true partners in a real alliance. 1 year, Counselor Thex repeated. That's all the time we have? That's all the time you need. If you're serious about change. The evacuation began in earnest. Human ships filled the docks of Unity Station and 400 other facilities across Council space. The exodus was orderly, peaceful, but inexorable. Taemin stood on the observation deck of the transport ship Earth's Pride, watching Unity Station shrink behind them. Beside him, Youngmi and Bora stood silent. Do you think they'll make it? Bora asked. Some will, Taemin replied. Some won't, but that's their choice to make now. It feels like we're running away, Youngmi said. No, Taemin corrected. We're letting them run towards something better, or fall trying. Behind them, Unity Station continued to shrink. Inside it, 12 species faced each other across the gaps that human voices had always bridged. For the first time in 70 years, they would have to learn to bridge those gaps themselves, or watch their civilization crumble in the trying. This is going to get worse before it gets better, Hana whispered. I know, Youngmi replied, but they had to learn. Words without underst. The arrest came on day 23. Jiwoo was sitting at his desk on Frontier Station when security forces entered his office. They were Vryn, tall, thin beings with too many joints in their limbs. Their leader carried an electronic warrant that glowed in the dim light. Jiwoo of Earth, the lead officer said through a translation device that rendered his words flat and emotionless. You are charged with sabotage through negligence and willful inadequate service. You will come with us. Jiwoo stood slowly, gathering his personal tablet. Am I permitted to contact the human embassy? You will be allowed standard communications after processing. They led him through the station corridors. Other humans watched from doorways and windows, their faces carefully neutral. Jiwoo met their eyes and gave the smallest nod. Stay the course. Don't break, he wasn't alone. Across council space, 12 humans were arrested that day, All translators or mediators, all charged with the same crime, doing exactly what the council had demanded while refusing to do what the council had always taken for granted. The news reached Daewon within an hour. He was in his quarters on Unity Station, reviewing reports of the cascading failures throughout council space. The numbers were staggering. Taemin entered without knocking, his face tight with controlled anger. They arrested Jiwoo and 11 others. They're claiming our people are sabotaging council operations. Daewon set down his tablet. Where are they being held? Various locations, all in council detention facilities. Comfortable by prison standards, but still imprisoned. Contact Earth, inform them of the situation. Already done. The response was brief. Taemin handed over a message slip. Daewon read it. Proceed as planned. Trust the process, he handed it back. Then we proceed. Daewon, they're arresting our people. How much further does this go? The ambassador walked to his window, looking out at Unity Station's sprawl. Until they understand. Until they truly grasp what they've lost. And if they never understand, they will. Look at the reports, Taemin. Look at what's happening out there. The military attaché pulled up his tablet, scrolling through the daily briefings. His expression grew darker with each page. The Merchant Alliance had fractured into 17 factions. What had been a unified economic bloc for 2 centuries had splintered in 3 weeks. The cause was simple. Without human interpreters to clarify the intentional ambiguities in their founding charter, each faction interpreted the document differently. All interpretations were technically valid. None were compatible. On Kepler Station, religious violence had erupted. 2 species whose faiths had coexisted peacefully for 50 years were now burning each other's temples. The cause was a single mistranslated prayer ceremony. Before, human cultural liaisons would have explained that both prayers honored the same cosmic principle through different cultural expressions. Now, with only literal translation available, each species believed the other was committing heresy. 37 dead on Kepler, Taemin read aloud. Over a prayer nobody properly understood. They had 50 years to learn to understand each other, Daewon said quietly. They chose not to. They relied on us instead. Can you blame them? We made it easy. Yes, I can blame them. Daewon turned from the window. We offered help. They demanded servitude. We gave cooperation. They wanted exploitation. There's a difference, Taemin. The military officer nodded slowly. The border situation is escalating. 3 species are mobilizing fleets. Each one thinks the others are preparing to attack. Our mediators could resolve this in hours. Our mediators are still there. They're reporting the facts. Facts without context are weapons, Daewon. People are going to die. People are already dying. The ambassador's voice was hard now. And the council blames us for being arrested for following their own demands. They wanted to dissect what makes us useful, as if communication is a thing to be stolen rather than a skill to be learned. Let them see what the galaxy looks like without that skill. A chime interrupted them. Hana's face appeared on the comm screen, her expression grave. Daewon. We have a situation. First contact. The ambassador felt ice in his veins. Explain. A new species. The Krell. They made contact with council ships in the Outer Rim. No human diplomatic team was present. We've withdrawn our first contact specialists. The council tried to handle it alone. And? Hana's face was pale. There was a misunderstanding. A gesture that one species meant as friendship, the other interpreted as threat. The Krell attacked. 7 council ships destroyed. 2,000 dead. The council retaliated. We don't know how many Krell died. Silence filled the room. They started a war, Taemin said, his voice hollow, over a misunderstood gesture. Human first contact teams never lose a ship, Hana continued. In 70 years, we've made contact with 200 new species. 0 conflicts, 0 deaths, because we take the time to understand before we act. The council tried to do it alone, and this is the result. Daewon closed his eyes. The cost kept climbing. Has the council requested human assistance? No. Vexthar issued a statement blaming the Krell for being unreasonably aggressive. He's pushing for a military response. Stop him. How? We're not advising anymore, remember? Then I'll request a council session. Prepare the reports, Hana. Every failure, every conflict, every death, all of it. They need to see what their pride has cost. 3 hours later, Daewon stood before the council once more. This time the chamber was tense, the counselors restless. Vexthar looked like he hadn't slept in days. Ambassador Dewan, the reptilian counselor began. If you're here to request the release of your imprisoned colleagues, I'm here to present a report. Dewan gestured, and holographic displays filled the chamber. Numbers, charts, incident reports. All of it painted in stark detail. In the 23 days since the Council issued its ultimatum, diplomatic incidents have increased by 400%. Trade disputes have multiplied by 600%. 3 species are on the brink of war. 37 beings have died in religious violence. 2,000 more died in first contact gone wrong. The galactic economy has lost 12 trillion credits. He let the numbers hang in the air. This is what the galaxy looks like without human mediation, without human cultural understanding. Without the gift you demanded we give you. We didn't take this gift away. You did when you demanded it be treated as a resource to exploit rather than a skill freely offered. You're killing people through your silence. A counselor shouted, "No." Daewon's voice cut like steel. You're killing people through your ignorance. We spent 70 years teaching you how to communicate, how to understand, how to bridge differences. But you never learned. You just used us as a crutch. And now that we're providing only what you demanded, pure technical service without voluntary cultural interpretation, you're facing the truth. You don't know how to talk to each other. Vexthar stood, his scales rippling with anger. This is blackmail. You're holding the galaxy hostage until we withdraw our request. We're showing you reality, Daewon replied. You wanted our gift without earning it, without understanding it, without respecting it. You wanted to take it apart like a machine and copy it. But communication isn't a machine. It's a relationship built on trust, respect, and genuine desire to understand. You destroyed that trust, so what do you want? Counselor Miraesh asked, her insectoid voice unusually subdued. Name your price. Daewon looked at her, then at Vexithar, then at all 12 counselors. This isn't about price. This is about principle. You will release our imprisoned colleagues immediately. You will withdraw all sanctions. And you will rescind your demand, not because we're forcing you, but because you understand that what you asked for was wrong. And if we refuse, Vexthar challenged, then we leave. All of us, every human in council space. We return to Earth and you face the future alone. The chamber erupted. Counselors shouted, argued, pleaded. Vexthar tried to maintain order, but even his voice was lost in the chaos. Daewon stood silent at the center of the storm, watching them fragment, watching them fail to find common ground, watching them prove his point with every word. Finally, he raised his hand. The gesture was simple but somehow compelling. The noise died slowly. You have 7 days, he said quietly. 7 days to decide if you want humanity as partners or not at all. 7 days to choose between pride and wisdom. He turned and walked out, leaving the council chamber in turmoil behind him. Outside, Young Mi and Bora waited. Well? Young Mi asked. We wait, Daewon replied. And we prepare to leave if necessary. You think they'll let us go? I think they'll have no choice. The first day of silence passed without notice. Jiwoo sat at his desk on Frontier Station, the same desk he had occupied for 6 years. The same view of the trading dock stretched before him through the transparent wall. Ships came and went, loading and unloading goods from a dozen species. Everything looked normal. His communication tablet chimed. A Vryn merchant was asking about contract clause interpretations for a major grain shipment. Before, Jiwoo would have spent 20 minutes explaining the contextual meanings, the cultural expectations, the unspoken understandings that made the contract work. Now he typed back. Clause 17. Payment on delivery. No exceptions listed, that was all. Just the words. No context. No explanation of what the Vryn actually meant versus what they wrote. No bridging of the cultural gap between their indirect communication style and the human directness the contract was written in. The merchant sent back 3 confused messages. Jiwoo answered each with pure, literal interpretation. Nothing more. By day 3, people started to notice. Young Mi stood in her cultural liaison office on Unity Station, facing a delegation of 2 species who had nearly come to blows over a religious ceremony dispute. 6 months ago, she would have explained how both species' prayer rituals were actually honoring the same concept, through different cultural lenses. She would have found the common ground, helped them see each other's perspective. Now she said simply, Species A prays facing the sun. Species B prays facing away from the sun. These are different actions. But what does it mean? One delegate pleaded. It means what I said. Different actions. You're supposed to help us understand each other. Young Me met his eyes with perfect calm. I am telling you the facts. Understanding is your responsibility. The delegates left angry and confused. Young Me felt no satisfaction in their frustration, but she felt no guilt either. The council had demanded human abilities without human choice. Now they would learn what that actually meant. Across 400 worlds, the same scene repeated. Human translators still showed up to work. They still sat at their posts. They still answered questions. But the warmth was gone. The insight was gone. The bridging of gaps was gone. They provided exactly what machines could provide. Words without wisdom. Hana walked through the Translation Corps headquarters, watching her staff implement Protocol Silent Stone. It had a name now. This coordinated withdrawal of human understanding. Every human translator in council space had received the same instructions. Translate only the literal words. Provide no context. Offer no cultural interpretation. Strip away everything that made human translation valuable. Director Hana, one of her junior translators, approached, a young woman named Bora. The Delthari ambassador is requesting clarification on yesterday's treaty discussion. He says my translation made no sense. Did you translate his words accurately? Yes, word for word. But in Delthari culture, when they say perhaps we should consider alternative approaches, and they actually mean we absolutely refuse this proposal, I didn't include that context. Then your translation was complete, Hana said. He said consider. You translated consider. That is sufficient. Bora looked uncomfortable. It feels wrong. We're setting them up to misunderstand each other. No, Hana corrected gently. We are giving them exactly what the council demanded. Pure translation without human interference. They wanted our ability as a tool. Tools do not think. Tools do not interpret. Tools simply perform their function. The younger woman nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. By day 7, the first cracks appeared in council operations. Taiman reviewed the military intelligence reports in his secure office. 3 border disputes had escalated from tensions to active standoffs. Without human mediators explaining what each species actually meant by their positioning and statements, both sides assumed aggressive intent. Sir, his aide Sung-ho entered with a tablet. The Kepler station situation has deteriorated. 2 minor species are now arming their security forces. Each thinks the other is preparing to attack. What did our mediator report? She reported the facts. Species 1 increased security by 40%. Species 2 increased security by 50%. Both sides requested interpretation of the other's intent. And she said that Species 1 increased security by 40%, and Species 2 increased security by 50%. Taiman closed his eyes. Before, a human mediator would have explained that Species 1 increased security because they were hosting a religious festival and feared pickpockets. Species 2 increased security because their cultural programming required matching any neighbor's security levels to avoid appearing weak. Neither was aggressive. Both were responding to internal cultural pressures. But now they just reported numbers. Let the species interpret intent themselves. Let them realize how much they had relied on human understanding. How long before shooting starts? Taiman asked quietly. 48 hours, maybe less, notified Day 1. He needs to know the costs are mounting. Day 10 brought economic chaos. The Vrin Consortium filed a lawsuit against the Delthari Union for breach of contract. The contract in question had been negotiated 3 years ago with human assistance. It contained 47 clauses, each written in deliberately vague language that both species preferred for cultural reasons. Human interpreters had always been available to clarify actual intent versus written words. Now the humans simply read the words as written. Both sides discovered they had completely different understandings of what they had agreed to. Both sides were technically correct based on pure literal reading. Both sides felt betrayed. The lawsuit would cost trillions and take years to resolve. It was the first of many. Jiwoo watched trade traffic through Frontier Station drop by 30% in a single week. Ships arrived, but negotiations that once took hours now took days. Deals that once closed smoothly now fell apart over misunderstood terms. Merchants who once trusted human advisors to bridge their differences now faced each other across a gap they couldn't cross alone. He received a message from a long-time trading partner. a merchant he had worked with for 5 years. Please, Jiwoo. I don't understand what went wrong. Why won't you help me anymore? He typed back, I am helping. You asked if the price was acceptable. I confirmed the price was acceptable. That is help. But is it acceptable by my cultural standards or theirs? Do they mean acceptable as in willing to pay or acceptable as in this is fair value? You used to explain these things. The word used was acceptable. That is the translation. The merchant didn't reply. Day 14 brought council emergency sessions. Day 1 attended, sitting in the human delegation box with perfect posture and empty expression. Councillor Vexthar stood at the center, his reptilian face showing the first signs of concern. We have reports of increasing tensions across council space. Trade disputes are multiplying. Border incidents are escalating. I call on all member species to exercise restraint and... Restraint? Councillor Thex interrupted, his avian voice sharp. 3 species are on the brink of war because they cannot understand each other's intentions. Our entire economic system is fracturing because contracts are being interpreted a dozen different ways. Where are the human mediators? Where are the translators who always prevented these situations? All eyes turned to Day 1. He stood slowly, his movement deliberate. Human translators and mediators are at their posts, Councillor Thex. They are performing their duties exactly as specified. But they're not helping. Another councillor shouted, they are translating. They are reporting facts. They are providing accurate literal information. Is this not what was requested? You know what I mean. Do I? Day 1 asked softly. Please clarify. Use precise language. I am only a human. I can only understand what you literally say. The sarcasm was subtle but cutting. Several councillors shifted uncomfortably. Vexthar slammed his hand on the podium. This is sabotage. You are deliberately providing inadequate service. We are providing exactly what you demanded, Daewon replied, his voice never rising. You wanted our translation ability without our judgment. You wanted our communication skills without our cultural understanding. You wanted the tool without the hand that wields it. This is what that looks like. The council demands you return to full service immediately. The council demanded we submit to genetic research. We have 30 days to respond to that demand. Until then, we are in compliance with all existing agreements. We translate. We mediate, we report. We simply do so without the voluntary additional context and cultural interpretation we previously provided as a courtesy. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Daewon stood silent amid the chaos, watching them shout past each other, unable to find common ground without human bridges. Finally, Vexthar called for order. The council will impose fines on human corporations for this inadequate service. That is your right, Daewon acknowledged. We will comply with all legal penalties. He sat down. Around him, the council descended further into argument. Species shouted at species, each unable to understand the other's real meaning, each unable to bridge the gap that had always been bridged by human understanding. Young Mi watched from the gallery. Beside her, Hana sat with an expression of deep sadness. The great council chamber stretched like a cathedral of metal and light. Daewon stood at the center platform, his dark suit crisp against the strange colors of alien delegates surrounding him. Above, 12 species watched from their elevated seats, their eyes, some multiple, some glowing, fixed on the lone human below. He had known this day would come. The whispers had started months ago in the corridors of Unity Station. The small meetings behind closed doors. The way Councillor Vexthar looked at him during sessions, like a merchant calculating profit. Ambassador Daewon, Vexthar's voice boomed through the chamber. His reptilian form shifted on the elevated chair, scales catching the overhead lights. We have discussed this matter extensively. The council has reached a decision. Daewon said nothing. He simply waited, hands clasped behind his back. Beside him in the lower gallery, Hana sat with perfect stillness, her translator earpiece blinking softly. Taemin stood near the entrance, his military bearing making him look more like a statue than a man. For 70 years, Vexthar continued, humanity has served this council with remarkable ability. Your diplomats end our conflicts. Your translators bridge our languages. Your mediators prevent our wars. This gift you possess, this ability to understand and communicate, it is unprecedented in galactic history. Daewon felt his jaw tighten. Here it came. Therefore, the reptilian counselor raised one clawed hand. The Council formally requests that humanity share the biological and neurological basis of this gift. Our scientists will study it, replicate it, and distribute it among all member species. Imagine a galaxy where every species can communicate as humans do. No more misunderstandings, no more conflicts born from confusion. The chamber filled with clicking, chirping, and various sounds of approval from the alien delegates. Only Counselor Thex, an avian species with brilliant blue plumage, remained silent in his seat. Counselor Vexthar, Daewon spoke clearly, his voice carrying without amplification. I appreciate the Council's interest. However, I must clarify something important. Human communication ability is not a technology. It cannot be packaged and transferred. Vexthar's eyes narrowed. Explain. Earth developed over 7,000 languages across hundreds of cultures. For millennia, humans had to learn to communicate across impossible differences or face extinction. Our ability comes from necessity, from survival, from thousands of years of adaptation. It is woven into our history, our psychology, our cultural development. There is no simple biological switch to copy. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Counselor Mira Esh, whose insectoid body gleamed like polished bronze, leaned forward. Are you refusing the Council's request, Ambassador? Daewon met her multifaceted eyes. I am explaining why the request cannot be fulfilled as stated. We cannot simply hand over something that took our species thousands of years to develop through experience and cultural evolution. Cannot or will not. Vexthar's voice turned cold. The human ambassador took a breath. Both, Counselor. Even if we wanted to. The mechanics of human communication are so deeply embedded in our entire evolutionary and cultural history that extraction is impossible. And frankly, we question the wisdom of trying to artificially replicate what should be learned through understanding and cooperation. Vexthar stood, his full height impressive even among the varied alien forms. The Council views this as an act of selfishness. You hoard this ability while the galaxy struggles. How many wars could be prevented if all species possessed your gift? How many lives saved? How many wars have human mediators already prevented? Taemin's voice cut through the chamber. He had stepped forward, his tone respectful but firm. How many lives have we already saved through our service? We have never hoarded our ability. We have freely given it in service to this Council for 7 decades. Service that could be rendered unnecessary if you simply cooperated. Vexthar shot back. Hana rose from her seat, her small frame somehow commanding attention. Counselor, I have spent 30 years translating for this Council. I speak 47 languages, including all 12 member species' primary tongues and hundreds of their dialects. I did not learn this overnight. I did not receive it through genetic engineering. I learned because humans must learn. We have no universal tongue of our own, so we became universal translators out of necessity. Pretty words. Vexthar dismissed her with a wave. But words do not change reality. The Council has voted. He looked around the chamber, all in favor of requiring humanity to cooperate with genetic and neurological research into their communication abilities, with full economic sanctions to follow if they refuse. One by one, lights appeared above the Councilors' seats. Green for yes, red for no. Daewon watched as green lights bloomed like poisonous flowers. 11 green lights. 1 red, Counselor Thex. The measure passes, Vexthar declared with satisfaction. Humanity has 30 days to begin cooperation. If you refuse, the Council will impose trade embargoes, economic sanctions, and withdrawal of Council protection from all human colonies. You will be isolated until you comply. Daewon felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear. Something else. Something harder. This is a mistake, he said quietly. That is for the Council to decide, not humanity, Vexthar replied. You are dismissed. We expect your formal response within 30 days. The platform beneath Daewon's feet began to descend. As it lowered him toward the exit, he looked up one final time at the Councilors. They looked so confident, so certain of their power and righteousness. They had no idea what they had just done. The descent platform touched the floor, with barely a whisper. Daewon stepped off, followed by Hana and Taemin. They walked through the massive doors in silence, their footsteps echoing in the corridor beyond. Only when they reached the secure human delegation quarters did anyone speak. They actually did it, Hana said, her voice carrying decades of weariness. After everything we've done, they actually threatened us. They see us as tools, Taman said flatly. Useful tools they want to replicate and discard. Daewon moved to the communications console. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease, entering codes that would encrypt the message beyond even Council technology's ability to intercept. The screen glowed to life, awaiting his words. He typed simply, "Protocols initiated. They've crossed the line." The message would reach Earth in hours. The response would take days. But Daewon already knew what it would be. Humanity had prepared for this possibility. They had hoped it would never come, but they had prepared nonetheless. "What happens now?" Hana asked. Daewon turned to face his colleagues. "Now we show them what the galaxy looks like without human voices to bridge the silence. We show them exactly what they're demanding. Pure service without heart, without understanding, without choice." "They'll realize their mistake," Taemin said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Daewon agreed. The question is whether they'll realize it before everything falls apart. Through the window, Unity Station spread before them like a jeweled web against the stars. Thousands of species living, working, trading together, all of it held together by invisible threads of understanding, communication, and trust. Threads that humanity had woven with patient hands over 70 years. Threads that were about to be cut. Daewon looked at his reflection in the glass. Behind him, Hana and Taemin waited. Beyond them, 400 human worlds held their breath, and somewhere in the council chamber above, 12 species celebrated their victory. They would learn. The galaxy would learn. But the lesson would be harsh and the cost would be high. Humanity had tried to warn them. Now there was nothing left to do but let silence teach what words could not.